Welcome to CreateAWorld. CreateAWorld is brought to you by a collaborative within the field of Tantramat. And that is a field of principles and guiding that guide us as a cultural collective. And and what that means is like being guided to wisdoms of new futures rising, ideas, thoughts. What are the principles that govern those new futures on behalf of all life? And what has us exist as whole? What has us exist as an expression of life, as a direct connection with that which is greater than us, that which is the greater whole of which we are a part. So again, welcome. And this morning, I'm Deborah Merchant of the Vital Psyche, and my guest is Elektra Porzel, director of the Language of Consciousness Institute. Elektra, we've had a lot of time where we worked with that series that you presented on New Stories. So I want to look at today, I want to look at what that is, people, is the Elektra started a series called New Stories, and she focused on questions presented by a man named Charles Eisenstein, who does a lot of work with how to look at things differently. What are the new stories? Where he's done a fair amount of investigating history, where we came from and where we seem to be going by certain indicators. And he would present questions, and we focused on that. So within that, we were exploring the ideas that Western civilization is based on, and we called those old stories, and we explored the certain threads. Each week he would pick a thread of where we seem to be going, and we examined that as the new story. So I want to explore more of that, meaning, can we choose our stories? How do we become conscious of choosing our stories? And what's the change process? So Elektra, I'd like to start with you talking about what started you on that, because I don't think I joined it at the beginning. I don't think I did. So what started you on that investigation? I can't hear you.
Okay, I'm back. Sorry. First of all, Charles Eisenstein had a blog in January that gave 29 of these old story, new story combos. And part of me goes like, wow, this would be really cool to discuss this with other people. I also started the year with this huge energetic drive that I had to be in conversation with others, in conversation. And to me, that really means that nobody's right, making everybody else wrong. And it was an investigation discovery process of, my God, is this really true? Is the old story really true? And how do we see it happening in the world? And if that's true, we also see some of the new story already happening. And the question everybody always used to say was, well, how do we as individuals and we as a collective bring the new story into a more common acceptance? Recently, we really came to the point that the reality that we experience and we think is real is only something that was agreed upon by the larger society. And if you remember, we read Sandtalk this last week. And in Sandtalk, he made the point that even the roles of the feminine and the masculine are determined by the economics of the society. And so they're not really real. And I think when all of a sudden my brain says, oh, then all these ideas that I had about what was or what I could be are really just inherited from the society that I live in. They're no more real than, ideas that I know that come from the 1800s. And I think, oh, why would anybody think that way? Only to find out that I indeed have been under that cloud.
Yeah.
And the reason I think we don't realize it is because the way the brain is structured. When we're all young, everything that our parents and our churches and our society tell us about how to behave and what is real are recorded in the brain as what? Short glial neural networks that really say, be girl, be this, girl means that, as an example. And it's just that society's definition or what they chose. And usually the choosing has to do with the economics of, do you want, like in the fan talk, he said, you want the men to do labor to protect the women. You want the women, if they were in a protected sort, to be docile or passive. And that's what's put down. That's the story that's told. And it's really nice. It's sort of like, if you remember back to the Hunger Games, when the gal's arrow hit the roof of the dome. And that's when they realized that they've been living in a totally artificial environment defined by those game players outside. I mean, really got it. And that's kind of what I experienced in this series, is little bit by little bit. And then I think the Sand Talk chapter really did it, was that we act as if the ideas about who we are and what we should be are what is truth.
Like intrinsically real.
Intrinsically real. I think that's a really good way to put it. And
because our science, which is very, there's a lot of structures of our Western society based on, the objective reality of science. And I think that's what they're always reaching for. What's the objective truth, the real truth? And you're saying that there's a lot that's way more malleable.
I think it's all malleable. I don't think there's such a thing as the truth. If you look at, even if let's take what everybody used to think about the brain.
Yeah.
In the 1960s, a couple scientists decided to study the malleability of the structure of the brain, and they were ridiculed out.
Yes.
Yeah, that's nothing ever changes in the brain. You can't do anything about it.
And by 3 years old, your brain structures are this and tabula rasa as an infant and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but by the 1990s, enough people had done research on it that now they believe that the brain is the most malleable organ in the body.
And when you say malleable, for just in case anybody doesn't know, you mean that the term is neuroplasticity.
Right.
And that means that if there's damage in the brain, other parts can frequently change to compensate and reconfigure that function. It also means that there's a whole lot of capacity to undo and redo lots of thinking patterns, which is what you've just been discussing.
Yeah, it's well, I think that for me, the first part of your explanation on malleability, neuroplasticity, is that the brain is not stuck. But I got a real interesting factoid this week. Went to the hearing aid person, right?
Yeah.
And I say, well, why should we have these hearing aids? And he said, well, they have discovered that if the brain is really working hard to hear, it takes cells from the memory. So
Really?
your frontal lobe, where you do all this complex thinking, that's where if the brain is trying to really work on hearing, it'll take cells from there. So they have linked the hearing loss to dementia and Alzheimer's.
Oh my heavens to Betsy.
Yeah, you go like, wow, that's fascinating. So of course I have hearing aids. And so I'm going like, wow, plus for me.
Yeah.
But if that's true, and then we can recreate ourselves. Yes, now I'm using an artificial means right now to be able to hear better, in hopes that, and after this thing this week, learning this week was like, whoa, okay, my memory is going to be not as impaired.
I'll be right in there. Let me get those hearing aids. Yeah.
Yeah. So in any case,
Yeah.
that's a small example of what they know. The issue of the glial neural cells is a different animal in that it isn't this exchange process. Like if I was born blind, the cells that would have been for sight can be used for something else. In the case of the glial neural networks, every fact or experience that you have is connected through some glial neural network in your brains, not just your head, but your gut brains, right? So if you add to those through, well, what they know from neuroplasticity, if you add to them through learning new things, having new experiences, that there's more options and more activity going on in the brain. Now, we do the creation exercises with the language of creation. And in those, people write what is life-generating, life-enhancing for them next to a phrase. So it's actually the same process, because these new life-enhancing phrases get added to all these networks you've already got. And they can give the brain more options for choice. So instead of falling into an age-old reaction that you do, then the brain gives you options. And some of those options, if you have done the creation exercises or you've learned new things, give you options to make different choices in your life. And I think that's when we realize that, oh, I don't always have to fall into this trap of an old behavior, but I have choice now, and I have choice now, is where you're going to see neuroplasticity.
Wow. All right. So let me say
all the
back
difference. Okay.
a couple of things, because that was rich. So, wow, let me get it in order. So first off, when you're doing, I'll start there. First off, I'm not. There's a lot of people waking up to a phrase that Tantra's often used. Well, it ain't necessarily so.
Right.
Use the example of gender identity and roles, but it's true across the board, like all kinds of forms of equity, how the economic system is used. Like we operate as if it's the truth across the whole world, and it isn't. And it really isn't. So people are waking up to various forms of it ain't necessarily so, from small to large. Then there's, okay, well, what do I do with this? I'm going to get to that in a few minutes. Then, and there's I say at the beginning, for a lot of people, my observation has been, that's how I should say it, that there's a certain passivity. Okay, I notice it ain't necessarily so, but what can I do about it? You know, so there's that. Then I also hear you saying that with the creation exercises, the templates that we do, it generates a side by side and eventually a takeover. It generates the new thinking. Did I say that right? I mean, well enough.
Yeah,
Like,
you've said it
here's the
well enough.
old
Yeah,
world,
it's
and then the
in the
new
marketplace.
comes, and then the new, we can choose the new. And what I understand, what I've seen, is there's often a what's wrong with me in this society, in the system we were born into,
Yeah,
that seems very, very subtle, or very large for some people, very dominating. And then one of the things that the creation exercises permits is the what's wrong with me dissolves.
it becomes very small
Yes.
because
Go
because
ahead.
well, one of the principles that we live by is that everything has a place, right? Everything's constructing and deconstructing. And the thing that a lot of us want to do when we're trying to change something is we go, I want to kick it out. I want to erase it. I want it gone.
Yeah.
But that's not living within the principles like that. So if we imagine that we make our room bigger and bigger and bigger, then that which was, I'm not enough, I'm, all that
Something's wrong
judgment
with
crap,
me. Yeah.
it's not going to go away, but it's going to become so small. It's down here in the little corner. So now it doesn't have the impact it had before when it filled the room, right?
Yeah.
And so it isn't a getting rid of it so much as it has its place, but it's so small, it doesn't have dominance. The other issue is that you did a gesture like this for something being taken over. I see it more like a huge network.
Oh.
So if I had a glial neural network that had 10, let's say 5, and they weren't, but those were the ones I fell into. Well, if I do the life enhancing, if I write a creation exercise, I now have, I have 12 more. So if I write those a couple times,
12 more.
I have 12, instead of having only, let's say, 5 options from X being X, now suddenly I'm going to have not just 5 more, but 10, 12 more. So
That's all
writing
the interconnection.
one creation exercise, I now have 4 or 5 of the original and 12 life enhancing, life generating phrases. Then the brain doesn't just go, oh, let's go here, let's go here. Then, oh, there's other options. And that's how you get choices. It isn't that they're smothered. It's just an option. It means that we're creating more options in our glial neural networks to see the interconnections of that which we crave in the world. And that's the key to it. The key is that we're providing more options in our brain and neural networks so they become the dominant path through which I can make choices.
So then I'm hearing a couple of things. There's a lot of things that happen to us in life that we don't have any control over. And we don't get to say, no, I'm not choosing that because I don't like it, or whatever. I'm not being flipped.
We can think it, but we don't have it.
And
it just happens to us. Yeah.
And that's an area where we can choose our response.
Correct.
But we can't choose the event necessarily. But there's a lot of things that we do activate. I'm kind of trying to re-say what you said.
Okay.
And I did this kind of, this sort of thing because for me, when I'm in that process of making choices, it isn't that I want to kill off one and only feed the other. But like in the old story, new story conversations we were doing, there are stories I don't want to promote within myself anymore. Correct. I do want it to become new. I do want it to become overshadowed or in a way replaced, because and I don't care if it's a simple one, I can't think of an example, one single thing, or if it's an overarching big social principle. I can't think of an example there either. Sorry, there's plenty. So I'm not saying like kill it off, but that's why that gesture, it for me, it becomes put it in the background, put it in that.
Yeah, when you were doing the gesture again, I thought, well, that looks a lot like a seed unfolding itself. If you figure out, how a seed there, and then it opens up and opens up, and then we and it goes to the ground. And to me, that's probably what your craving is. Your craving is that seed, and part of its original, let's say, root structure might have been the things that are life defeating, but more and more root structures grown, so that seed, that plant, that craving, as it manifests in the world, is fed by all the life enhancing, life generating phrases that you've written. And it's sort of like the advice we give kids, hang with people that you admire. Do activities that bring you joy. There are a lot of euphemisms, or that's not a euphemism, but an advice that we give that actually is along that line.
Yeah.
Surround yourself with that which you are aiming for, even though you think you can't do it. It's because in the being around that, it becomes more a part of your possibilities. And that was a big deal with all the next stories we talked about, because we're talking about trying to create sustainable societies for the coming generations. And how do we do that when the present society is not sustainable? My 12-year-old grandson looks at me this week and says, our economic system is not sustainable. And I said back to him, our education system is not sustainable, and our religious systems are not sustainable. But he's 12.
And he said that. Now,
when it's 12,
I want to interrupt here because that's important. Not only is that astonishing that a 12-year-old said that, had that much thinking capacity is what I mean. That's not what happens, but I'm seeing it more and more amongst the very young. But what I'm pointing to is, was he saying that from a kind of a, let's call it depressed place, like,
no.
Or was he saying it from, I'm recognizing this as accurate and feeling a sense of power in the matter?
He was saying it from an awareness discovery position.
Okay.
I don't think he has a sense of, because I came back and I said, it's on your generation to change it. And then I started thinking, no, it's on my generation. I'm his grandmother. So I feel it's my responsibility to start laying the seeds, of, it's probably awareness or just being with him. It's like he likes to get into like trying to figure something new that he wants to make, right? And I always say, and he goes, oh, I didn't do it right. I don't want to have to erase this again. And I go, well, won't it be exciting when you find the next place? And he says, I really like the way you said that, Grandma. So
that's what you're fostering. That's what I'm
fostering. I'm fostering a mind that goes, let me figure this out. Well, this doesn't work. Okay. Oh, look what I figured out now.
And you're fostering a mind that can think alternatively and think from what you were saying of those life enhancing, one teeny little neuron at a time, but it's life enhancing. Because we've both met plenty of people, and I'm sure all of you all who are watching have experienced this. I've felt it myself. The thing of, I may see something as alternative, like what I think I want, but I'm so entrenched in the fear-based, not life-enhancing, separation-based reality that I give more weight to, more reality to what's life-defeating than what's life-enhancing. So there's and I'm going to get to what you said earlier about the deconstruction construction. I want to go to that. There's something about first we're giving power to what we want to give power to. We're feeding the one.
We're feeding something and giving power to it. I can't
Yeah.
say it's something we want, but we are unknowingly feeding it because we assume it is what is real.
Or we're giving more reality to. And I got the correction about not what we want. But if I'm chugging along like this and I see this one is bigger, more dominant, but it's less empowering, less life enhancing, and I see this over here, the new story, but then I could choose to, this is the choose your response part. I could choose to like tack in the wind towards what would keep making that more and more not dominant. See, it's hard to find the new words.
Well, it's hard because I think it isn't a choice at some point. And let me give you an example that I recently discovered. One of the thoughts that I've had about money is that, one, I call it funny money, which means it doesn't have reality for me because, well, I'm talking finance and investments.
Yeah.
And I also had a belief that it was too difficult for me to comprehend the intricacies. So I wouldn't do it anyway. Okay, so that I discovered was a dominant thinking pattern of directed whether or not I took any action on the other side of it, which is, well, I would really like to have enough money to really be comfortable in my life, right? But this thing about, I don't really understand all that. Okay, now, those are two things that have been fighting with each other most of my life. What? I got an aha this, like, oh, I guess other people could help me understand the intricacies. I don't have to figure it out myself. Never came up as a possibility when I craved having enough money. It was either I've got to somehow figure out how to tackle all this detail that I have no idea and actually no interest in really knowing and that kept me from really, in my reality,
Yes.
I believe, attracting enough money because I gave dominance, and it's an emotional side to it. But I never entertained a compromise or another avenue. And it's sort of like my grandson working on whatever he was designing. When I told him, well, won't it be exciting when you find something else about this design that makes it work better? That's the aha I got this week, that, oh my God, there are people appearing in my life who can actually I can trust, that tell me what to do or guide me in informing me about money. So to me, there was a lot of emotion having to do with my inability to comprehend detail. And also there must have been emotion that no one will help me, or I can't trust anybody. So I think those dominated to the point that I never got to really manifesting having enough money better.
Yes.
I think it's emotion and thought is what I'm saying.
Yes. And I'm trying to, and there's, because you thought it was real, that you couldn't understand, no one will help me. You thought that package, I'm just going to call it,
it's a package,
was real. That's what got fed until there was enough interruption somehow to have a little, oh, there are other options, which then excited you and led to a whole bunch of things that you've talked about. You just alluded to them. And now those are becoming the dominant ones, the life enhancing. Maybe I can. Yes, there isn't only one way. And you're not even spending time. Well, when did that thought pattern start and how do I process this? And I'm not saying that's not valuable at certain times for people. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that there was something that allowed you to bridge fairly quickly.
And I think that something was, now, just so y'all know that Deb and I are involved in this money matrix game right now, which means writing a number of creation exercise, observing other people's observings. And in the reading of the other people's observings about having enough money, I discovered that they felt just as crappy as I did
Yeah.
about things. And I'm going like, what do you know about that? I'm not the only one.
Mhm.
And so when I say I'm not the only little person in the corner who doesn't understand it, I discovered, oh, gee, I'm with a group of people who have a lot of the same emotional, small, can't do things around making enough money. And when I realized that, I said, then this isn't just me. That means, and I know it can't be just the people in the group, which means, whoa, that means that this is a societal implant.
Yes.
You can't do that. And when I got that, it was like the arrow hitting the dome of the Hunger Games. And ta-da! And so that's the kind of interconnections I'm making now, but it really, really helps to work with others. I will tell you that was so eye-opening.
Yes. So so there was something that came in the chat that said, how does that work at the neural level? In like the mirror neurons. So I think the way I would say it, and then you add what you know, is something interrupted. It's hard to do this. Which comes first? So
the chicken or the egg.
The configuration you were in, the neural patterns of the developed neural patterns led to thinking of, I'm isolated, I'm alone, I'm the only one who can't do this, I'm going to be left behind, all those, and I'm not going to have enough, and oh my God, and that's very scary. And so that's a neural patterning as a short version. Then when you get into with other people, mirror neurons are part of how we learn to understand social cues, understand facial expressions, understand emotional registers. That's what mirror neurons permit as a baby's growing in a real short form. But I think in that kind of situation, other people are saying, oh my God, I'm scared, I'm isolated, I'm the only one, I'll never get out of this, I'm stuck, help. But every single one of us have some version of, I know this isn't the only option.
Yeah,
and
correct.
When you get, I think, in terms of the neural pathways, when you get into a group, if we were each a neuron, now you've got a neural collective of something else is possible. I think that's what breaks the Hunger Games dome. I love that image.
It really is. What did that come up sometime within the last 2 days? But
I don't know.
Great image to say, if we have a structure that we believe is real, even though we don't like it, once it breaks in any point, then suddenly the options and possibilities are there.
Yes.
And I think one of the ways that we get control is when we think it's just us.
Yes, I think so.
This there's a number of people in the field of Tantra Mud, I would say, probably all of us, who didn't fit. Yeah. Okay, we didn't fit in to what society said, how you should think, how you should feel. And our entire lives are always being in juxtaposition, trying to be like everybody else, not really wanting to be like everybody else, but trying to fit in. So that's, and it's a really spending a lot of our energies on, gee whiz, something else could be much more entertaining, much more life enhancing to do. And the value of what you just talked about. I really never thought of mirror neurons. I didn't realize that they were part of the development process.
Yeah.
I know that I know that like when you watch anyone, you would like do a yoga teacher, that your mirror neurons are doing the thing. But I'm thinking, if we no longer if we come to a point that, oh my God, this isn't just me, I'm not the oddball out who can never join. And you get, I'd rather be me, and you're comfortable with that. Then the possibilities of putting a lot of that energy we have used on trying to kind of fake it so we'll fit in, which I think it happens a lot when you're kids, but it happens as an adult too. Think of all the energy that is now possible in your life because you are doing what is your passion, and you're being you, instead of thinking, like I spent a lot of my life couching what I said.
Yes.
Relative to what I thought the other people wanted. Because if I said what was in my head, it might not fit. I might not fit
Right.
in.
Right.
And I've had enough of people, Mom, you're really weird. And I actually ended up considering that a compliment when the kid said that. So,
yes, me too. Yeah.
But I don't know if I skipped around from what you were saying. But yeah, it is this. It feels like we've been crouching low, trying not to draw attention to ourselves, because what we needed and wanted in the world was not what society was saying you should be or is needed. And now we've come almost to a full stance.
Yeah.
And in the full stance, say, I know what I want to do in the world and what I need to do, and I will do that. And that is when your mirror neurons start taking effect with other people who are not involved.
Yeah, I think so. So to go back to it, when you were reading other people's observings on the same starting point, then first off, I think it would go this way. What showed up was like I said, the isolation. I'm insufficient. The system isn't all that. But then there's something about how they perceive that's just a little different. And we're designed to keep going with each other like this. So there's our little and you line up, because there's something about their observing that's sparking that. How do I get from here to there? Or what else could be possible? And then the dome breaks. Then there's no more power. Well, not no more. The power of I'm less, I'm insufficient, I'm alone.
Right.
All the fear-based stuff, the power of that can decrease because something else is rising. And what you present also feeds back to them. So it's a constant feeding mechanism. So that's how I would say the mirror neurons operate. But here's the part, I want to make sure we go over this, because what I've heard in what you've been saying is a lot of subtle and overt ways we do make choices, even if they're not quite conscious choices.
Yeah.
But we either make a choice to stay within whatever the existing thought pattern is, for whatever our reasons are. And in terms of giving everything a place, that's okay. That's your choice. There's also when we begin to shift, we say, oh, I want that more than I want this. Oh, I want that. And we feed that and it becomes greater. So that's the first point. But here's what I want to address, because I hear a lot of people talk about, isn't it great to be healthy? Isn't it great to be spiritually evolved? Let's have the new world. all the, and I agree with all of these.
Okay, good.
I do. Those match my values and I support all that.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying anybody out there should or shouldn't. I'm just saying what's mine. But what I did not expect was hitting the wall. I did not expect the discomfort, the it sounds wonderful. It sounds like everything's going to come up roses because I'm now on this path of health or path of spiritual growth. So what I came to eventually, took a long time, was, the principles of creation, which are like, I'm going to call them mirror neurons to quantum physics rules of, the universe. The principles of creation are true no matter what. Whether you're talking about spiritual growth, health, attaining health, financial growth, whatever you're talking about. And I couldn't remember the fourth one. So if anybody out there watching remembers them, or if you do, everything is always deconstructing, constructing. You said that earlier, Elektra.
Everything operates on behalf of everything else.
That's the first.
Everything is
operates on behalf of everything else. Everything is always deconstructing, constructing. Everything is always expanding and contracting, and everything's always moving to the next greater whole.
Everything is part of everything else.
That's what I put at the beginning because you said it.
Okay, and everything has a place.
To me, that's part of the first one.
Okay.
So what does that mean then? If everything is always operating on behalf of everything else, I think that's where, for me, it still stays, I'm going to call it feeling good. Then when it moves to everything is always deconstructing, constructing, I forget almost every time I start something new that the new patterns that I want to be part of, or no, let's say it differently, the old patterns that I existed within result in my life looking and being shaped a certain way. Mm-hmm. As I move into new patterns I want to be part of, then the old patterns often deconstruct. And that's not always comfortable, whether it's patterns of thinking, patterns of feeling, patterns of behavior, habits. Like when I'm getting healthy, if I'm going to eat healthy, I have to give up the unhealthy. Real simple. And of course, it can be very complex. Everything's always expanding and contracting doesn't mean necessarily falling apart. And expanding doesn't always mean it looks wonderful and good. Everything comes up roses. Hold on, there's something here. Somebody put something in the chat I want to read. The principles of creation. Okay, thank you, some person out there. Our expansion and contraction, deconstruction, constructing, collapsing, expanding. I think that's expansion and contraction.
Yeah, that's the same thing.
And always moving to the next greater whole. So yours of everything operates on behalf of everything else, I think was, and in that everything is part of everything else, everything in relationship with everything else, and everything is operating on behalf of everything else. This is the meta point. Yes. Yes. So
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, when you were talking about it, reminded me of a premise that Uncle Porta had in the Sandtalk chapter. Yeah. He said there's always violence in the
Thank you. That's what I was aiming for. Yes.
Of expansion, contraction, construction, deconstructing. And he says for us we have to give violence its place. And his point was you set it up so that there's in his case, he was talking about Aboriginal villages and making the violence public, not private. In the way that you're talking and just describing, we're talking about yeah, recognizing that there is whatever you want to call violence, or there can be upset, there can be uncomfortableness, there can be a not happy rigor in the process of deconstruction and even in construction. So there's these, where, you remember the movie Pollyanna,
Mm-hmm.
and everything was kept belonging, everything nice. And the truth is, there is this violence, this hard part of both contraction and expansion. And when we know that it is a norm, it is normal that we should experience that. Like my grandson's frustration that he couldn't get a drawing right, but because he kept at it, he ended up with a drawing that he really loved.
Mm-hmm.
So we all have to do that. Everything is going out of existence and coming into existence.
Yes, there we go. There we go.
Mhm.
That was the fourth one. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that's what you were getting to,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
There's also because in that chapter from Yunka Porta, Sandok, the author is Yunka Porta, and Sandok's the book, for anyone who wants to know. The he used the word violence, but he meant it in a very multidimensional way, because there can be violence of a microaggression, there can, which is, or gaslighting. What's that phrase we grew up with? Sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt you. Well, that's not true. So violence can be all kinds of things. A very subtle, it's something life defeating, I would say.
Yes.
But it can also be part of creation. If the Big Bang Theory is true, that would have been pretty violent, the Big Bang, and what resulted was all the magnificence and beauty that we have just on this planet alone. And then, out into the universe. So violence meant a lot, both life enhancing and life defeating. And he did that chapter brilliantly, talking from, basically, in my mind, it was like from the creation of the universe all the way through social structures and back again, and the diversity of social structures. And he wove it brilliantly. So I'm referring to all of that when we start making changes, whether if we've chosen them, want them, we've activated them, or if something happens to us and we don't have a choice about the circumstance, we just have a choice about our response. There's the deconstruction, construction, everything going in and out of existence. Everything is always expanding, contracting, and everything's moving to the next greater whole. So that takes a lot of adjusting to. I think that's something that takes some growing into. Would you agree, Elektra?
What do you mean, the process of making room for?
Yeah.
Okay. The one thing I would say is that it is not always choice. If your neural networks, glial neural networks, are very limited, then it is a reaction. Mm-hmm. It is not a choice. So you fall in it. Have you ever, like one time I was working on doing something in the door of my house, in the frame of the front door. And I went from being upright to down on the ground. I didn't know the difference. I could not even feel myself fall. And I think that's what reaction is. I think that we get into situations where the glial neural we have emotions working in that, we have thinking working in that, but it's such a deep rut in our brain that we do it. We say something horrible we shouldn't say. We do an action that we wouldn't do if we thought about it. And that's the problem. We have so many of these deep rut. It's sort of like the deep rut that you get out of bed in the morning, you go in the bathroom and you brush your teeth. That's a really cool, that's a just fine deep rut because you got to do it, right? And you train the kids a lot in that.
Well, you don't got to do it.
No, you don't got to do it.
But
you could go around with hairy teeth. Yes,
and it's very life enhancing deep
Yes.
rut. I
But
get it.
it's a life enhancing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of deep ruts like that in our brain that we don't have any problem with. I think the deep ruts that we are not prepared for is the one like I described about how I viewed my ability to handle money.
Yeah.
That was a deep rut, very limiting. It really held me back. The only time that I realized it wasn't just me was when I read other people's observings about their templates about having enough money. And I realized that it was all of us had the same, same limited view of how we could handle money. And at the same time, I was always remembering, I have a friend here in the building who has been a real estate person, owned lots of stuff, owns property now. And he goes, oh, it's easy to make money. And he said it with that tonality. It's easy to make money. And I was like, really? Not my world. And that's when that was the first inkling I got that oh my goodness, that there are different ways to think about it. But I didn't get the block, as you say, or the brick on the head until I read everybody's observings. And I went, oh my God, I'm not the only one who feels this way. Yeah. And if it's the 5 of us or whatever number in the group is, if it's all of us, that means it's not a just me situation. It means that I bought into something bigger.
And the chances are it's not just the 5 either.
Right. I mean, it's like a lot of people, right? So when you discover, and so there's an example of that discovery put a crack in the dome.
Yeah.
Writing more stuff widens the dome. And so I can start now probably learning, being more in the field of the guy who goes, it's easy to make it.
Yeah.
I didn't even ask him how, because in my own head, I said, for me, it is not. But now I can have another option, which goes,
yeah,
maybe I could learn. Maybe he has some suggestion that would, or maybe I should just rub up into his field, and maybe I'll get something from this. Oh yeah, it's easy to make money. So it really is a very complicated thing, because I think those deep ruts of limitations and life defeating thought patterns we own as if they are who we are.
As if it's the truth.
Yeah. But it's not. It's just the territory that you happen to be, or the reality that you were given to and have believed it is yours, and it's real. And
I appreciate that, because I did not mean to presence the idea of we have choice in any kind of flip way at all.
I know you didn't. I just wanted to make sure the reaction.
I appreciate that a lot, because it's a very sacred thing. And I actually think choice begins before it's conscious choice. It's something that I'm interested in exploring deep, because in a certain way, given what you said, and I'm very familiar with reaction. People, please. Reaction has been part of my expression in the world way more than I wish. It's just that inside the place where we believe it's the intrinsic truth, so in a certain sense it is true, that we're still, I'm going to keep going after this, because there's something I'm not willing to let go of about the sacredness and power and authority of human being. But even those words get said a little too much, so it sounds too pat. And I don't mean it pat. And I didn't mean it, the stuff about choice, as flip. I meant it as access to who are we as humans, that we would have that much power and authority to even come to the truth is, I'm not someone who can make money, have money, whatever your composition was. And then the power and the authority, when you get that little, you see other people's observings, oh, I'm not alone. What does that mean? I mean, you may not have been intellectually thinking that, but there's some kind of process going there. And what does that mean? Look what else they said on that, in that observing. Or look, this man said, it's easy to make money. Well, that's a foreign thought.
Yeah.
That's alien territory. But then something had you, first you said, that's alien territory and I live over here. Then something had you, whatever the process was, something had you lean in and say, wait a minute, I could take a journey into that land. I wonder what that would be. And then a couple of things have happened that suddenly you are taking steps. You got your little backpack, you got your little walking stick, whatever you've got, and you may not have a map yet. But like, I watched this movie yesterday. I watched two movies. One was Chevalier, which Tantra recommended, and I watched it, and you're watching it. So have you
I
finished
watched it? Yeah.
Okay, well, for anybody who hasn't, I won't say much. There is so much in there about how things weft and weave in unexpected ways. But in the second movie I watched called I Am David, it was about a little boy who was in a concentration camp. And he was one of the few children. And this whole set of things happened that the guard helped him escape and gave him a package with papers and told him, go to Denmark. And all these serendipitous things, this boy doesn't know how to get to Denmark. All he knows is he's got a compass that the guard provided, and the guard said, keep going north to Denmark. He doesn't even know, but there's all these serendipitous things that helped him, that affirmed his journey, and he got help in all these. It was beautiful. And the ending is astonishing, but I believe it would have happened for a lot of people. So that's kind of what I hear too. But then you could choose, and again, that word I think has, I'm trying to use it in an alchemical way to represent the power you have. So something shows up, like this man who says, money, and you say, let me go over there and at least touch the reality. But then you're gonna, do you see what I'm saying?
It's the sacred driver of, I think, the soul and the spirit.
What a beautiful way to say it.
It's, well, you made the statement about the sacredness of a human being's power. And when that little boy, he kept following that, and that was almost like his greater spirit saying, no, keep going, no matter what happens. And that's how the serendipity came in. I think that's true, because my friend said, oh, it's easy to make money. And all of a sudden I was like, that's a really different concept. So he got that working in me. I ended up with this group of people working on having enough money. So we have the capability within our state to shift those things that we think are concrete or don't even know are concrete. So it's an amazing capability of human beings.
Yes,
absolutely.
And here we are at the 2-minute mark. So that, as you just said, is astonishing and empowering. Not astonishing like it's astonishing like every time I get reminded.
Yeah.
And it's time for us to be done.
We are magnificent beings who have the capability to change our lives and the world. All we have to do is start intending that.
or imagining. I mean, look at how every single invention ever happened. Imagination, a craving, some form of,
Discovery, exploration,
yeah.
intention, attention, and compassion.
Yeah. All right. So thank you everybody for joining us. This was remarkable, and we could go on for another hour. I could go on for another hour.
Yes, you and I definitely could.
So just thank you all for being here. Take everything that came up today and work it in your system however you can.
Yes.
And we'll see.